We come across spiritual teachings everywhere these days, but we don't always know how to integrate those ideas into our personal lives. As much as we may understand the concepts of how to live an awakened and conscious life, it's not easy putting that wisdom into practice. What happens when we step out into the real world? In this series, we're going to be talking to real people about real lives. We're going to meet some amazing individuals and learn how ordinary people can overcome extraordinary battles in their lives using the wisdom of oneness. Welcome to Life Talk. Today we're talking about marriage, and joining me on this discussion is my very own wife, Harmeet Kaur.
At what point in your life did you ever get taught about what to expect from marriage?
The best part of being married for me is just that constant companionship.
I think the best thing about being married to Harmeet is that I married my best friend.
We've worked hard on this relationship.
And no one would see that.
No, because you don't show that kind of stuff.
There are so many ways that we're also complete opposites to each other, and she's constantly challenging me.
You have to do whatever you need to do it.
Now's a chance for me to lay it all out. I always feel like I'm walking on eggshells with you. Like, I never know if the next thing I'm gonna do is just gonna completely destroy this relationship.
Falling in love, it doesn't last, and it can't last.
Wow. This relationship is starting to crumble.
How did we get to this point where we're like this with each other?
Once the kids are old enough, I'm out. Yeah, let's start. I'm glad we're doing this. I think this is a really good opportunity, and I think all husband and wife should sit down and do this and kind of just sit back and just reflect on marriage, married life, what works, what doesn't work.
This has been a really important part of our relationship, I think.
I actually expected our marriage to be exactly like the initial stages of our relationship.
Right.
So I went into marriage thinking I'm having a great time with this person. I get along with them. I know everything about them. We have great dates that we go out on, and I just want this for the next 30 years. So I think I entered our marriage with the expectation that this was going to be, that's it. Life was not going to change. And I think certainly there have been moments in our marriage that I've resisted change because, as far as I was concerned, it's like anything new isn't what I signed up for. I signed up for those initial kind of honeymoon period. I signed up for that, like, because that's all I knew.
Yeah, which you're basically talking about the falling in love.
Yes.
The falling in love phase
process.
where you just can't think of anything else and you're just totally and utterly intoxicated with each other, and you can't imagine anything else taking priority in your life. It's just like,
I wanted that to last. That for me was yes, that's what marriage is. It's going to be like, I'd hit the jackpot, and I used to think that no one else knows what this experience is. Nobody else seems to be having this sort of experience of marriage, and that kind of falling in love period was going to be just extended by 50 years or 100 years or whatever.
I mean, to be fair, my idea of marriage was really just a feeling of unknown. For me, especially being a female, not knowing who I'm going to end up marrying, and also being aware of the fact that, especially for a female, you're more expected to compromise your life. I wouldn't know, I might end up in another country, which I was willing to do for the right person.
That's really surprising. I think as a guy, we don't often have those concerns about marriage. For us, marriage is almost a bonus, something that that we get to add to our life, as opposed to it being something that completely changes everything. Like, you don't know where you're going to live and who you're going to be with and all those sorts of things. We don't really see marriage, or certainly I didn't see marriage in that way.
So I certainly did. I was very aware, probably growing up in an Indian community, that I may end up some other part of the world or some other part of the country, and for me, the biggest factor was obviously who is Mr. Right.
Does that mean that you were willing to get married to someone unknown to you?
Yes, because if I came to the conclusion that this is the right person for me, absolutely.
I think that's the complete opposite of what my perception of marriage was that I always thought I would marry someone I know. I couldn't conceive of the possibility of even trying to get into a relationship with someone who was just introduced to me and someone who was just unknown to me.
I would prefer to marry somebody that I know and I've gotten to know over a period of time, but the possibility of, if that didn't happen, this whole arranged marriage backup system was there, and I was aware.
So your expectations then of what married life would be like is then really dependent on who...
Yeah, it's so, there's so many
who
options.
you're going to be with.
Yeah, because you may end up living in an extended family, you may end up with someone remotely in some part of the world where there isn't much family. It just, the possibilities are endless. So what's been your biggest challenge about being married?
Be married to you?
Being married to me.
Where do I start?
This one.
Here we go. Okay, now's a chance for me to lay it all out. I think, in a way, the start of our relationship was also a little bit challenging for me because, if you remember, I had to fight my parents to get married to you.
Yeah.
Not because they didn't like you or not because they didn't want me to be married to you, but because I was the youngest in the family and my sister was older than me and she hadn't been married yet. So my parents were really reluctant for the younger sibling to get married. So there was a lot of challenges just trying to overcome that hurdle.
I remember that. I remember the difficulty and I just remember you really being tormented by that. And but in some ways, it kind of brought us closer together.
You and me saw this as kind of, it was us against the world.
Yeah.
And you're right, that completely made us closer and made us bond a lot more, even before we were married, knowing that we were going to go into this relationship as a really strong unit.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of my challenges and part of the difficulties I experienced later on in our married life, because we'd become such a strong bond, I had created an expectation in my mind that that's what life was going to be like. And one of the things I found myself doing was I found myself totally devoting myself to you, like in every single way, like down to the smallest details. Like if I was preparing a meal and I was serving 2 plates, yours would always be the better one. I would always put more food on your plate and I would like give you the better portion of whatever dish was being prepared. Like every part of me completely surrendered to you. I put you on kind of this pedestal. And probably the biggest obstacle that I faced, I had created an expectation in my mind that it was always going to be like this and that you reciprocated in the same way. It sometimes occurs to me that I don't go to the grocery store without giving you a call and being like, do we need to buy grapes or do we, like, I don't make these decisions on my own, and that's part of the transformation, I think, of going from a single life into a married life, is that you just become so overly dependent on the other person for the smallest, tiniest little things. Like you can't make simple choices. But when I, in practice, saw that I wasn't as independent as you, I think I really had to kind of learn to almost deal with my own emotions and my own attachment that I'd created for you in those early stages.
My biggest challenge in this marriage has been my behaviour, in terms of, as things get difficult, like just juggling work and your expectations and kids and stuff, as things have just gotten more busy and difficult, I found myself behaving in ways that I wasn't happy with myself.
How do you mean?
In just frustration and even anger or just irritability, just, you know, when life just gets so busy, and you would point out to me my behaviours for me to be able to see them, and then that's been my biggest challenge over the years, is to actually know that that's something that I have to work on.
I always say that you never learn more about yourself than when you're in a relationship. Because that's for the first time when you get every single thing that you've thought about, every single thing that you've said, every way that you've done something, that gets challenged, or at least it gets questioned. You've not been doing it right all along, you've just been doing it your way all along. And I think if you're not careful, you can very easily create arguments out of the smallest little things, and you can actually create conflict within those kind of early stages of marriage if you don't have something stronger holding you together. Like we had this underlying love that said no matter what the conflict was, that ultimately we knew that we were going to be able to get past it.
What has been the biggest awakening that you've had from marriage?
For me, the whole process of falling in love was such a life-changing experience that the stark difference between who you are as a person before you've ever truly loved someone and who you are on the other side is just so different. And I don't think I realized what an impact love was going to have until I started feeling that transformation within myself. I remember one morning very early on in our relationship when I would wake up and I couldn't tell if I was just me as an individual or whether you and me were somehow like merging together. I remember waking up in the morning and thinking, I'm not just thinking about you, I can feel you. And this is before we were married, before we were together. So this is me in my parents' house, and I could feel like you and me were now a single entity. And that to me surprised me, but it didn't scare me. It was just a real eye-opener that I didn't realize how this was. And for me, that was the point at which I felt like I could really truly for the first time understand spirituality and understand Gurbani. And now when I would be looking at it, I was struck by this love that they were singing about, and I got it. And I would look at them and I would and the words that they were saying, and I thought, wow, these guys are in love. Because they're saying things that I understand now. I get it.
I feel now.
I feel what they're feeling. And because I know the feeling, I can see that that's what they're talking about. So that whole process of falling in love was such an eye-opener for me that I have said to people time and time again, if there's one experience in your life that I wish for you to have on your spiritual journey is to know what it is to truly love. Even if it's to love another person or you know, we're taught that we're not meant to have these attachments with external things and we're supposed to go on this inner journey. But that falling in love process isn't an external thing. It is something that happens inside you.
The biggest realization that I think marriage has given me is that the whole process of falling in love, it doesn't last, and it can't last.
Wow.
It goes through phases and it changes and it becomes something else. And not to say that that's anything, it's not as intense. The falling in love is the, you know, the floating and the, you know, you're in another world. But at some point, you can't stay there. You have to come back down to the ground. You have to come back to reality.
And are you saying that's something you didn't know, or you hadn't experienced that?
I think you can't know how it's going to evolve. You just like now. I'm just grateful and blessed that I had the experience of falling in love. But it doesn't stay. It never stays the same. It's always evolving. It's always changing. And from that, it becomes something else. And actually, if you think about the whole purpose of having a marriage or a relationship is actually to know that, okay, I've done that as well, and as amazing as it is and as perfect as it is, and I wouldn't change anything, it still hasn't filled that little void inside that only then takes you back to the Guru, that only takes you back to your own personal journey, spiritual journey of awakening or whatever that is, for you to actually continue to look for more bigger perspective and truths in life. You think somehow it's going to fulfill you, And it does in
Yes.
a lot of ways,
Yes.
but it's even
But there's something left.
Yeah.
There's something left. And when you realize that
Yeah.
there's something left,
Yeah.
then that's a huge blessing to try and use that as an opportunity. And you need to be guided in the right way to know that void that's still left in there doesn't mean that there's something wrong in your marriage. It means that that's ultimately the nature of reality, is that nothing externally
Yeah.
is ever going to fill this one thing.
You
And
have to go through it to actually get to the point where you realize, oh, even that didn't do it.
But only if you know to see it as a truth that you're still seeking, as
Yeah.
opposed to just a failure or cracks developing in your marriage.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's very easy to look back and say, well, our marriage was like this to begin with,
Yeah.
but now it's just not as good as it used to
Yeah.
be. Actually, the marriage is failing.
But it's natural for you for it to change, and
Go in a direction that was always going to go.
Yeah.
It was never going to stay in that direction.
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to make you think that your marriage is failing is the fact that you're holding on to this kind of old idea of this is what marriage should be.
Yeah.
And I know, because I can say that from my own personal experience.
Yeah. And this is where, like you said, where it comes to midlife crisis, or where, like, say like 5, 6 or 10 years down the line from marriage, you think, that's where I can see, and it's so obvious where you can see where people start thinking, oh, well, maybe this one wasn't the right one. Maybe if I try again, another relationship with another person, I'll have a better outcome.
Yeah.
And the reality is, even if you decide to go down that road, yes, you probably will have a falling in love and that whole roller coaster of emotion and experience again, but you're going to end up in the same place because it can never last.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think marriage has really allowed me to realize is that ultimately you actually are still on your own. As much as you can have a loving relationship and support and people and everything could be perfect around you, within your own psyche, within your own mind, you still have to deal with everything yourself, and your perspective and how you see things really changes how you deal with them. So it's really, a blessing and amazing to have the companionship and the relationships that are helpful to you around you, but you still have to address your own demons.
There are still parts of you that you have to deal with.
There's still aspects of there's still going to be maybe occasions in your life or things that you just deal with internally. You have to deal with them on your own, and that's where, for me, I have love and respect and faith in my guru. And as much as you will be, Gurbani constantly reminds us that in the end you are on your own. In the end you're going to be traveling that path of when you leave this world on your own.
And do you think that the time and effort needed to reflect on yourself, to commit to the other person in your relationship, to work on a relationship, changes after you have kids?
Oh, absolutely. I think for you and me, certainly, it was really clear after we got married. The few years before we had kids was pretty much the whole falling in love and still being in a totally intense state of love. And I think the only thing that actually changed it for us was actually when the kids came along, or certainly when the first one came along.
Yeah, that to me was a huge shift in our entire relationship. And probably for me, one of the most difficult things was learning or being forced to lose you to this child. As much as we were still the same people, this one little child changed the dynamics of the relationship so much that I had to deal with the fact that I was this third wheel.
Yeah.
And I remember...
And it was automatic. As soon as that first child was born, that child needed priority and attention, both from you and from me.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, this is secondary, that's primary.
Completely. And I found it to be a huge blow to my ego when I was no longer the center of attention anymore, and I was no longer the recipient of all of your love and attention, because there was this child, and I remember you giving so much attention to the child as you would naturally do, being the mother, and the child completely idolizing you and looking up to you because you were you came, you know, he came from you and he feeds from you, and he like you were his entire world. And I think that was probably some of our hardest times being in this marriage, some of the most difficult time that we had together, because at that point we had so much priority to give to this other thing that being just polite to each other wasn't a priority anymore. It's fair to say that we argued a lot more, we fought a lot more.
Yeah, so from being a priority to third wheel, and then our second one is born, and then I think for you that was just like, okay, now I'm literally
Ego
at the end of the road.
Yeah.
And up to that point, we were really active in terms of our communication about our relationship. Up to that point, we would go for dinners and talk about, oh, so where are we at? How are we doing?
How are we doing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, so how's this going?
Yes.
How are you finding? You know, we would talk about our marriage and talk about every aspect of it and see how it was progressing. But as soon as that child came along, that just kind of didn't happen.
No.
And for many years, probably
every
about
conversation was then about the child.
The children, and it just changed the whole dynamics of our relationship.
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't until many years in, like about 3 years in, where we were in such a different place to where we were before the kids. And only when we could see the stark difference from where we had been to where we were actually taken aback, and we were like, how did we get here?
How did we get
we get to this point where we're like this with each other from where we started? We started like the, you know, total perfection of what falling in love and what a relationship could be.
But just the demands of parenting were so challenging and so strenuous on us, as I'm sure they are for any new parents, is that, like you said, we didn't know until much later on that that's actually what had happened. We had let our relationship slip, and we actually then, I think, had to rebuild some parts of our relationship and say, no, we're still a couple no matter what. We had to then stand back and actually say, look, this relationship is starting to crumble. Because we're not doing anything for it. And it's important. We realize the importance of actually consciously taking time to nurture this relationship. We were very fortunate. We had grandparents to babysit, so we would when they were old enough that we could actually leave them even for a small amount of time, so we could actually have bonding time again and actually go into a restaurant and have a meal where we could actually talk as well. So we had to make a conscious effort to do that. And I think since then, we've often spoken to other couples and almost warned them of that, and make them aware that you need to be doing that from a... Because you never get told. No, you don't. You never get told that there are going to be points in your relationship where you just want to get up and leave. Yeah. And I reached that point. I reached points in my life where I said to you, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. Yeah. I reached a point in my life where I said that once the kids are old enough, I'm out. Yeah. Because it was so difficult. It was just such a challenge. And now looking back at it, it's because at that point we were just so engrossed in parenting that we were then almost a struggle to be together, because it was your way of parenting or my way of parenting, and I don't think people would necessarily have seen that from the outside. No, they wouldn't have known that we were struggling. We were at that point. We were struggling. I thought it would be really interesting for us to look at a Shabad from Guru Granth Sahib Ji to see how the Guru tries to advise us on what the best way to live a married life. And this is a Shabad by Guru Arjan Dev Ji, the 5th Guru. And he says, night and day, meditate on the one who will be your help and support in the end. This poison shall only last for a few days. Everyone must depart and leave it behind. Who is your mother, your father, your son, and your daughter? Your house, your wife, and all other things shall not go along with you. So gather the wealth that shall never perish, so that you may go to your true home with honor. In this age of darkness, those who sing Kirtan, the praises of the divine, in the Sangat, in the holy congregation, O Nanak, they do not have to endure reincarnation again. And I thought that was a fascinating Shabad, where the Guru is trying to say that everything that you're gathering in this life should be seen as a poison. Guru specifically uses this word poison. And the poison means that it's something that's detrimental for you. So to see life and all your house and your wealth and even it talks about your parents, your mother, your father, your sons, your daughters, your house, your wife, nothing is going to go with you. So it's not that they are poison, it's the mindset that you have that these things are mine and that they're permanent and my life is about this stuff. That's actually a poison. And it says those people are living in a delusion. And the most interesting thing that Guru says is that there's another thing for you to be earning. We spend our whole life trying to earn money and house and cars and try and buy nice things for ourselves, for our wives, husbands, for our family. But Guruji's saying there's another thing that you've forgotten to earn. There's another currency that you've forgotten to earn. And it says go and earn that currency so that you can go to your true home. So I thought that was a really interesting word, that we call this our home, we call this our life, but this isn't your real home. There's another home and there's another thing that you haven't earned. And then it concludes in the end by saying those who sing kirtan, those who actually sing divine praises with other spiritual people, they're the ones who are going to be saved ultimately.
So it's those who are connecting with that which is the essence of you, with that truth within them, rather than looking externally through relationships, through material things, whatever it is. That is not,
true home is something that you've got to go inside you. But the currency that you almost need to earn in order to access that home is the currency of praise, the divine praise, rather than earning currency that kind of helps you to buy things in life.
It is about prioritizing, isn't it? Because it's so difficult, because you get into a marriage, your priority is that relationship then, and then you have kids and then they demand that your priority. But ultimately you're kind of always working back to knowing, actually, so the marriage, as amazing as it is, it didn't fulfill me. Oh, the kids, as amazing as they are, they didn't fulfill me. So there's still that constant longing and that journey to find what is it that the gurus and the sages of the past and the bhagavas, what is it that they were talking about that ultimately truly gives you bliss? What is it that actually fulfills you? And Guru's always reminding us that these relationships are important and they are necessary,
but they're temporary.
They're temporary.
How do you think Gurbani, Gurmat spirituality has helped us in our marriage?
I think the way I see it is I married the Guru before I married you, and the Guru was that first love and wisdom and understanding in my life that really just formed my shell, if you like, of what I knew was the most valuable thing in my life. And finding you was a really beautiful and a good way to kind of further that journey. It's just to have a companion of somebody who's into the same thing, and we're just, finding our way on this path together.
You and me had committed ourselves to the Guru long before we became a couple. And it is as though we had already had our first marriage with our Guru, and then this was almost a second marriage. So ultimately, even at this point in our life where we're so in love with this other person and where we're giving all of ourselves away to another person, there's that voice of wisdom and guidance that's just kind of underpinning it all. That's just sitting at the back of all of it.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that brought us so close together so quickly, because we valued and appreciated the same thing.
One of the most important things I think that I've learnt from Gurmat spirituality and have tried to implement in my life is that I think in our early years of marriage, because of the uphill struggles that we had to face in order to just be together as a couple, this was the only reality. You and me being together was the only important thing in our life. And then as our married life has kind of progressed over the years, and as we've talked about these kind of unfulfilled void that's always sitting there inside you, it's I've been so fortunate that we have a guru in our life that's been able to put that whole thing into perspective, to get you to realize that this isn't the permanent reality.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a while to get into that frame of mind, to actually understand that this is really just a play. I don't feel like this was some amazing destiny, or I've gone and conquered the world and I've found the one woman that I love. Like the universe just put us into this situation, and being able to step back from life, I think, has been probably the biggest gift that the guru has given me. But I mean, that doesn't mean that we don't argue with each other, or we don't, have on a daily basis moments where we're completely unconscious and we forget and we shout at the kids, or we take things far too seriously than we need to. But at least you can go back at certain points of your day or certain points of your week, and you can say, that's not the way I should have been acting. But you know that because the guru has given you a different perspective on life. And one of the blessings of being able to read Gurbani on a regular basis is that it constantly brings you back into that way of thinking, which is, why have you taken this to be the reality when this is just a dream? I don't see this as a reality. Yet I still have to be in this.
Yeah.
I still have to be in this world, but I don't have to be of it. I don't have to take life so seriously.
Yeah.
But that's just so much easier.
And you don't do anything different, because you still have to feed the kids and pick them up, and still have to
You still have to do everything.
Yeah. But it's just a different. It's like you're just a little bit. It's a step back. It's
You're
like
removed
there's another
from
perspective.
some of that thing that's pulling you towards this world, that makes you say, no, you've got to give this your 100%. It's like you're always giving it your 90% or 99%. There's always a percentage of you that kind of realizes this is not where it's at.
What would you say have been the key life principles that have worked in our marriage?
I think one of the most important things that we established right at the beginning was when you, very early on in our relationship, made me promise to always tell the truth. And I remember when you said that to me, I just instinctively said yes, because I wanted to be with you. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll tell you the truth all the time. And I meant it, but I didn't have any idea what it really meant to speak the truth, because I don't think I've ever been in a relationship, not with my sister, not with my parents, not with any of my friends, where I literally told them how I felt and how they made me feel for the smallest, tiniest little things. And I didn't think it through when
when you agreed.
When I agreed to the fact that we would always be honest with each other. But very quickly into the relationship, into making that promise, I could see the benefits of that.
I remember having I remember once you were supposed to take me out for my birthday, and and we had been planning it for like the last week or so, and the night before, for some reason, you texted me saying, oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it.
Yes.
And I remember being like gutted. I remember being really devastated, like, what? Like, what? And you called me after that, and on the phone, initially I was like, I put on a brave face and I was like, yeah, that's fine, yeah, of course, and I made it sound okay. And we put the phone down, and immediately I knew it was wrong, and we had made this promise of being honest with each other, and I had to force myself to pick up the phone again and actually and have that conversation.
Say how you really feel.
Say how I actually felt.
That has been the hardest thing.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing, to actually overcome that resistance within you that says, no, I'm not going to tell her how I feel. I'm not going to give her the satisfaction sometimes that she's hurt me,
you're vulnerable.
Or whatever.
You're making yourself vulnerable.
Yeah. But that promise that we'd made to each other in an instant has really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I just know that at any point that there is this underlying promise that we've made, that no matter what, we have to say what we feel. And even if that means, addressing things that are difficult, or saying something that you think is going to hurt the other person or whatever, that you've made that promise. And I think that's been the bedrock of our entire relationship.
Whenever somebody explains and clarifies what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and how they feel, then you can learn to read them better. Yeah. And I think we were very early able to actually, without words, know where each other were, because of the fact that we had been on this process of being honest about how we saw things and how we felt.
Do you think we're better able to now understand our own emotions because we had to tell each other about them?
I think as a process, yeah, that was the development. Because even the fact that you have to reflect your emotions in a way to be able to explain it to someone,
yes,
makes you look at them. Otherwise, normally you get an uncomfortable emotion, and what do you want to do? You want to run away from it. You want to hide from it.
You
want to eat something, or you want
to. You don't process what are the actual feelings?
Yeah.
Like, what do I mean by this feeling of discomfort? What am I trying to say? How do I explain it to you in a way that not only tells you how I feel, but doesn't let you down?
Yeah. And a lot of the time, what we learnt is, especially when it comes to things that might not be taken so well, if it can't come across as an accusation, it can't come across as a judgment. So we had to learn to kind of, if you did or said something that didn't sit well with me, you don't, if you say it straight away, sometimes you react and it comes across and it becomes an argument, which what happened a lot later on. So then we had to learn to kind of accept it and take it and see, okay, this is something that I didn't like. And then you have to strategically bring it up when we're actually having a loving conversation and say, when you did this, I really didn't like this. And
timing is so important. Like, you don't necessarily say how you feel at that moment. You don't be honest in your most raw hurt moment. That's not the point necessarily. If it, sometimes it could be the point, but at other times you have to think about what is the best time. Am I going to explain myself in the best way? Do I need my own time to process how I feel about this before I can actually verbalize it in a way?
I think it'd be nice if we went through some commonly asked questions that people ask about marriage. So I put some in a bowl.
Do I have to pick one?
And you're going to have to pick one. Back of the drawer.
Let's have a look. How do you know that you're with the right person? I think you need to have the opportunity to get to know the person. And you really need to think about what it means to have the right person. For me, the word right means compatibility. It doesn't mean that you think the same about everything or that you feel the same way about everything, but it means that you're compatible to deal with each other's differences. Are you both capable of appreciating each other, being respectful to one another, and looking after both yourself and the other person? Are you able to prioritize the other person in your life? And it really just comes down to how both of you are compatible in that way. I don't know, how do you feel?
That makes sense. I mean, I think the reality of it is you can never say that you will find that person who's completely perfect in every way. I would say we're perfect in every way, but that's not because we match and we actually see everything the same. We still have arguments, we still have differences, but it's about being able to work through those and actually deal with those. I think for us very early on, it became clear to both of us that this is it. This is the person that I actually want to spend the rest of my life with. And I think there's two elements to that. There's a logical element where, I often, if I'm making a decision about anything, I'll have pros and cons. And you actually logically go through, okay, what is it that works? Make a list of those things. What is it that is not desirable? Make a list of those things. And you have to go through a process of actually logically, with your mind, thinking about that process. And then there's another aspect, which is your gut feeling. How do you feel about this? Does it feel right?
You can still get, be head over heels in love with someone and still want to look at whether it makes sense logically, rationally. Does it fit? Does this person fit in your life? And not only in your life, but in the life of all the people around you, and how is this person going to impact how you work and the friends that you're with? So it isn't good enough to just have the whole Bollywood fall in love kind of romance, because you really have to look at compatibility, and I think that's what it means to have the right person.
How do you remain faithful and avoid temptation in a marriage when things start to feel mundane and boring?
You will find times in your relationship where you don't feel attracted to your partner, or you feel like you are so frustrated with them over one thing or another that you can't think about having a good time with them, or you can't think about enjoying your time with them. And then all of a sudden, the lure of another person starts to become the most exciting option for you. And the most important thing to realize is that no matter what you think that other person is going to give you, A, is it worth breaking up what you have in your relationship? Is it worth letting your entire relationship go? And B, is that going to give you everything that your current relationship doesn't give you? Or is that other relationship just going to end up in that same place?
Exactly. I mean, the grass always looks greener on the other side. So even if you were to decide, okay, you know what, this looks like a better situation, and even if you were to go down that road, it will inevitably end up in the same place, because that honeymoon period, that falling in love, that amazing new relationship feeling, it can't last forever. As soon as it becomes reality of life again, you'll be back in the same place.
But the question around how do you remain faithful, sometimes people might just make the choice that, yes, I know that that's a temporary pleasure, but I'm getting nothing from this relationship, so maybe I should have that temporary pleasure. And I think it's about assessing what all of the factors are that are going to come into play. How long are you going to be able to keep that up? How long is that little relationship on the side gonna keep you going? Maybe that will become boring, maybe that will become discovered, and then what's gonna happen to your relationship? Are there children involved? What difference is that going to make? So it's understanding all of the different dynamics and then putting it all into perspective, and then maybe just going back and thinking about what was it that brought you into this relationship. Maybe you need to put more effort into trying to resurrect that than just running away and having this temporary escapism. Is it necessary to get married if you want to be in a long-term relationship? Controversial question. I think yes, it is necessary to get married. And I think there's something very important about going through the ritual and the ceremony of marriage. And I think it's so important. If you think about all human civilizations, there's always been ceremonies to mark key milestones in your life. And I think there's something about what having an event, having a commitment, having a day where you say, this is the time on which I formally declare my commitment towards another person. I think it does something to your psyche. That 10 years down the line, 20 years, whatever it is, you always know that there was this one day when I made this commitment, and when I gave 100% in front of my friends and my family and everyone. And I think that makes a huge difference in your own mindset, because there are going to be times when you want to walk away from this relationship and you say, I don't want to do this anymore. There's going to be times where you want to say that there are better options for me out there. And having this ceremony, this actual physical act that you do with each other, really kind of binds you two together, because it's a commitment that you two have both made.
I think my answer to that question would automatically be a no, that it's not necessary to get married to have a long-term relationship, purely because I have no judgment of anyone else who wants to do it that way.
I think it's been great having you on the show, and I'm really glad that you and me have had this time to sit down and talk about it, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that you and me have gone on such a wonderful journey, that we're able to look back, we're able to talk about it, and we're able to share our experiences with other people.
If you and me, who have always been really compatible and really gelled well, if we have been through rough patches and we've struggled to the point where we're like, oh, this isn't working, I'm not sure if we're gonna be okay, you know, and what are other people going through?
And maybe in a couple of years we'll be back here talking about the new lessons that we've learned. We'll do an update. But this worked out really well. We're letting people into our lives. There are certain things in our marriage that are never going to get resolved.